Hi guys, and welcome back for our second lesson in our fractions topic here. Today you can see we're going to be looking at fractions of a quantity, and you are going to be learning how to find a fraction of a given value. So in order to be successful today, you will be able to use the rules for fractions of a quantity to solve problems, and always remember to check for your units at the end of a question as well. Of just means multiply. When we are finding a fraction of a quantity, we're really just multiplying that number by a fraction. So, for example here, 1/2 of 4 is just the same as half times 4. So your 4 here is our quantity and the half is our fraction. So a fraction, a half of our quantity 4. Half of 4 then, or 1/2 times by 4, remember that means that we are splitting it in half, so into 2 equal pieces. So that is just equal to 2. So really what we did here was we divided by that bottom number. So we divide by the bottom. Okay, so we are going to find 1/2 of 6. So all that means then is that I take my quantity 6 and I divide it by the bottom of my fraction, which is 2. So 6 divided by 2 is just 3. 1/3 of 9 then, well I take my quantity 9. We are finding 1/3, so I am dividing by 3. And that just gives me an answer of 3. So 1/3 of 9 is 3. And then lastly, 1/5 of 45. So I take my 45, I divide it by 5, and that gives me an answer of 9. So 1/5 of 45 is 9. But what about if I had something like 2/3 of 9? Well, we know what 1/3 is. We took our 9 and we divided by 3, and that gave us 3. But I've got 2/3 this time, not just 1/3. So I need to take my answer and then multiply it by the top number. If I've got 2/3, then I just take my 1/3 answer, which was 3, and times it by the top of my fraction, which was 2, to give me 6. So 2/3 of 9 is 6. When we find a fraction of a quantity, we divide by the bottom and we times by the top. This is our really important fact for the lesson. So if you are copying this into your notes jotter, make sure you put a box or a bubble or highlight it, because this is super important for today's lesson. We divide by the bottom and times by the top. So, finding 3/4 of 12 then, well I need to find 1/4 first of all. So 12 divided by 4 is going to give me 3, and then I take that number 3 and times it by whatever is at the top, and that gives me an answer of 9. For 4/7 of 14 then, I'm going to take my 14 and we're going to divide by 7 to give me 2, and then I take my 2 and multiply it by whatever is at the top of my fraction here, and that's going to be 2 times 4 to give me 8. And the last example here is 9/10 of 60. I'm going to find 1/10 first. 60 divided by 10 is just 6. I take my 6 and I multiply by whatever is at the top, and 6 times by 9 is 54. So 9/10 of 60 is 54. Sometimes we'll need to watch out for our units. So remember, these are things that we use to measure. So it could be kilometres, could be kilograms, could be pounds. So this example, 2/3 of 18 pounds. Well, I'm going to find 1/3 first. So 18 divided by 3 should give me 6. And then 6 times by the top of my fraction 2 is going to be 12. But it was 18 pounds, so I'm going to make sure that I put my answer as 12 pounds there. 5/8 of 24 grams, exactly the same steps as before. So 24 divided by 8 is 3, and then 3 times by the top of our fraction 5 is 15. It was grams, so I need a little G for grams at the end there. And that is you done with the notes portion of today's lesson. You'll see here I've used our chili ratings again, but I've also put our calculator symbols here. So for our mild section, we should not be using a calculator. We should be showing all our working like I have in the previous slides. But for question 3 in our medium section, some of the numbers can get a bit tricky or a bit big quite quickly. So I will allow a calculator, but I still want to see all the same working that we would show before. Just this time you can use your calculator. Okay. For question 4 then, it's our hardest section. Again, no calculator. The numbers themselves aren't too tricky. It's the fact that you are having to pick this out of the question and work out what it's asking you to do. All of these questions are fraction of a quantity, so you are taking your fraction and multiplying it by the whole number. Give it your best shot, and any problems, you can contact me through my email or on our Teams chat. Try your best, and I'll see you in the next video.